once again everyone, welcome back to my channel. This week's video I'm doing something a little bit different for me. I decided that I was going to paint the cover of this Strathmore Vision sketchbook. Now one of my goals for 2018 was to actually enter more contests and festivals and like gallery type things, and so I saw that Strathmore has this cover painting or decorating, designing, whatever you want to call it, contest going on where you design a cover of one of their new Strathmore Vision sketchbooks, and I happen to own one of these sketchbooks already because I picked it up the last time I went to Blick because it looked kind of interesting. So I decided that I was going to go ahead and paint this sketchbook and enter that contest. And I thought it would be something that was fun and a little bit challenging since I've never who's painted on a cover of a sketchbook before. I'm sure a lot of people have, but I never have. So I got out this sketchbook, and the sketchbook I have is 9x12, so it was pretty big. I taped off the edges so I would have a nice clean edge. The cover itself is kind of like a dusty blue color, which I was not quite sure how that was going to look with whatever I decided to do, because at the time when I decided I was going to paint this, I wasn't sure what exactly I was going to be doing. So I went through some of my older sketches and I found the sketch that I ended up using, which was from an old sketchbook, and I had a struggle of a time trying to figure out how to transfer that sketch onto the cover of the sketchbook, because normally I would use like my light box if it was on just regular paper, but obviously I couldn't do that. I would have used my projector, which I've never actually shown you guys. I have like a digital projector that I use for larger projects, and I just put the scan of the sketch that I'm going to be working on into like a USB drive or whatever, and plug it into that projector, project it onto a wall which has a piece of paper on it, or whatever, canvas paper, whatever I'm using to work on, and then I just kind of trace it onto the new paper that way. And that's what I was going to do with this, but could not figure out how to get the sketchbook to be propped up on a wall well enough that I could have transferred the sketch that way. So I ended up using some of that graphite transfer paper, which I've had forever and never used. I haven't used graphite transfer paper probably since I was in high school, because I did not like it back then, and I still don't like it now. I just found that it was a little bit difficult to get the full detail of the sketch that I was trying to transfer onto the cover of the sketchbook. It may have been the material the sketchbook's made out of, because it's kind of like a really heavy cardstock, or it might have been that the transfer paper was old because I've had it for 100 years, but it did work okay. I don't know if I'll be using it for any other projects in the future, but it did get the sketch down enough that I could then go back in with it in pencil and fix it up and make it the way I wanted. I don't like redrawing sketches. I like to transfer them, since I feel like if I redraw something it never looks quite the same, and I just really liked this sketch and wanted it to stay as close to the original as possible. I am once again working in gouache, since I felt like that was the material that would take on, or that the cover would take easily enough. I wanted to use marker, but I didn't think that the marker was opaque enough to actually cover that blue color that the cover is. The gouache worked really, really well on this cover. I was really surprised. I was afraid it was going to make it buckle or warp, but it didn't do anything at all. And I used a pretty decent amount of water when I was working on this, but at first I went in and I just outlined the original sketch in a like kind of watered down purpley gouache mixture. I am working in the Zorn palette once again. And at first you can see that I really, really tried to keep my palette in the frame, because I always get asked if I can have my palette shown so people can see the color mixing, because I know a lot of people are really curious about doing color mixing, but my palettes for gouache are like these big porcelain plates that I got from the dollar store, and they work really great for gouache and watercolor. If you're looking for a cheap palette, I recommend going to the dollar store and grabbing some just porcelain white plates. They work amazingly well for this. But the palette's so big that I can't fit it onto the frame with you being able to actually see what I'm working on close enough. So I have not figured out a way to show both, and I'm not a fan of the dual camera, because I know someone will say, oh, you could have a dual camera, but I'm not a fan of the dual camera. I find it distracting. But yeah, so I tried to have my palette in the frame, but eventually I just kind of scooted it out of the way. Since I am right-handed and I keep my palette on the right-hand side, I kept bumping it, so eventually I just moved it out of the way. And as I already mentioned a little bit ago, I am once again working in the Zorn palette, which I have a whole video on that I made a couple months ago, and I will link that down below and up on the screen somewhere right now, so you can check that out when you're done with this video. I get asked about this a lot, about mixing limited color palettes. That video that I have on the Zorn palette is probably the best way I can explain about how to mix limited color palettes. It really just takes practice and knowing what colors go with what colors to make other colors. I get asked a lot if I can make a color mixing video, but I feel like, I don't know, I just don't feel like I would be able to explain what I do well enough to be able to share that with people. I definitely recommend, if you're trying to use a limited color palette, to do what I did in my Zorn palette video, which is make swatch cards. I made 2 separate sets of swatch cards in that video and showed it showed all the color mixing and stuff for it. And then I actually use those swatch cards. I put them in front of me when I'm working on it, so I'm like, okay, if I need to make this color, I will just mix these 2 colors and add white or black, whatever. And that's what I do. I always have a color wheel and swatches, if I have swatches available to me when I am working on something like this. But I've used the Zorn palette for like 5 or 6 years now, and I'm really comfortable with it, so I don't have to use the swatch cards as often as I used to have to. I definitely recommend, if you are trying to learn how to do color mixing, there's so many resources out there on YouTube, on Google, anywhere. If you're looking for just basic color mixing using your primaries and a white and a black, just Google color mixing with primary colors, and you'll find so many resources that other artists have very, very kindly put out there for people. I look for resources like that all the time if I don't know how to do something, and it takes practice and a lot of time to learn how to do color mixing. I took several color theory and color mixing classes when I was in college, so that's why I'm okay at it. I still think there's a lot I can learn about color mixing, but you know. Anyway, I'll get back to talking about this. When I got towards the end of the painting, I just realized that I did not like how the face looked, and you will see me, or have already seen me, really working on that face to kind of get it the way I wanted it to, and I'm still not 100% happy with it, but I was feeling like it was starting to get a little bit overworked, so I just kind of left it how it was and went on to the background, which I used a pearly, semi-transparent pearl acrylic paint, because I wanted to see how these covers took acrylic as well. They took acrylic alright. It did get a little bit wobbly and warpy, but I just set a really heavy book on it and it flattened out no problem. And then I used some golden acrylic, I think it's the fine gold acrylic paint, and that's my favorite gold. It's so beautiful. I do kind of wish that I had left that pearly area just that blue color, because I do think that blue color is really pretty. But overall, I'm pretty happy with how this came out. It was a really fun experiment. I've never done anything like this before, and it'll be really fun to be able to carry this sketchbook around with me with my own art on it. That's kind of the appeal to me, is having my own art on the cover of a sketchbook. I didn't seal this or anything. I may put a varnish or something on it, but I'm not sure if I'm going to do that, because I don't know if this sketchbook will be leaving the house with me or not. Anywho, I will leave links down below to where you can check the sketchbook out for yourself, as well as links to all the supplies and tools and fun things that I used. Thank you guys so much for sticking around with me. I know this video is a little bit longer than the ones I normally post. And subscribe if you're new. Hello, I make art videos once a week. And give this video a like, it really helps to support my channel. And I will see you guys next week for another video. Bye!